Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Inverted Podcast, where we talk about all the things that we as people that deal with inverted products have to live with. As you know, success for us is when nothing happens. And even if something does happen, we don't know if it's really bad or good because we don't know how much badness is out there. And this leads to an entirely different way of approaching building products, selling products, managing products, promoting products. And that's what we talk about in this podcast. And if you want to know more about the idea of the inverted product or product manager, have a listen to our other podcasts. And as always, you can engage with us on LinkedIn in our group, or you can ping us individually and the different profiles that we have on LinkedIn. And as always, I'm joined by Dario, Tom, and Dana. And today we welcome special guest, first time, Christina. Thank you for joining. Christina has years and years of experience in security operations and crypto systems, and so we're really excited for her viewpoint. And whenever we interacted, we had interesting conversations, so we decided to invite her along. Good afternoon, everybody. Today we want to bring something to you all that is really close to my heart personally as a product manager. That's the user. And very often when we build systems and we think about making them secure, we sometimes lose kind of sight of the user. That's where user-centric security comes into play. And so before we start discussing all the bits and pieces, Dario, can you help us define what user-centric security could be, like in your words?
Yeah, I think in very few words, it is helping the user to do what they want to do or need to do. If it's like a work thing or a consumer, what they want to achieve, and to achieve that in a safe and secure way. So really supporting them to achieve their goals rather than to have them jump through fire burning loops and hurdles and other obstacles.
So when you create the account, you want to make sure that the laptop doesn't go on fire at the same time because of all the hurdles they need to take. And Christina, I think the traditional view that we have is that in security, sometimes we think the user is the weakest link, but maybe that's not the right view, right?
So I think having built or assessed security products and solutions over the years, when I think of user centricity in security, I think of what decisions are we making when we're building said products, and are we really putting the end user at the center of our decision making, whether staying out of the user's way, whether installing or setting up the system in such a way that the user doesn't need to make unnecessary decisions, or making sure that we're not annoying, asking for permissions and fatiguing the user in their interaction with the system.
Oh, you really bring a bunch of interesting things. So removing decisions when not needed, getting out of the user's way is also a really interesting one. Reducing fatigue, and sometimes this goes wrong, right? And Dana, Tom, I think you might have some examples that you've observed where this can go wrong, right?
Sure. Let me. I'm going to do two real quick. One is a little soapbox about Meta. My wife went to set up a new Instagram account to share pictures, like travel pictures, with my daughter. And as soon as she created it, it was immediately suspended, and she got this like scary message. It's like your account is suspended. You need to go and recover it. Um, okay. Now Meta might, I understand shifting resources around and things like that. Maybe like there's high false positive rates or whatever. She got put in this bucket, but a new user being told, like someone that you want to be involved in your system, and telling them you did something bad and you need to recover your account. That's one thing. The same thing happened to my son. He was trying to get on Facebook to create a brand new Facebook account so his team and all the parents were sharing pictures in a Facebook group. He did it twice and was immediately suspended. And like that's how you have users walk away. I will get into it in a little while, but I don't know why you don't change the messaging in that scenario. Just that simple thing could help you. It doesn't hurt your security, it doesn't impact your security, but it can make the users feel a little better. Instead of telling them you did something wrong, you were suspended. The other thing I wanted to talk about, something a little different, is in Microsoft and Microsoft Account, we used to allow users to they still do, to report themselves compromised, right? And the UI, they could go and look at their activity, and we found that like the rate that users would mark their own sessions as compromised was like 60%. Like 60% of the data that we got through that was just wrong. Like users were just doing the wrong thing. Um, and so we spent some time doing a redesign and flipped that around and got it down to like 30% error rate, 35% error rate. And then at that errors, we could take it out because we actually, the system could tell when they were wrong. But the whole reason was we were confusing the user with what we showed them, and then asked them if this session was really compromised, because we were showing just a couple of examples, like in the user login, we were showing like very specific based on the IP, like you logged in from this town, which is valid the way the reverse IP looked up. But like you're a normal person, you're looking at it like, I've never been to this town that's 40 miles away from where I actually am. That has to be like someone else trying to get in, or they wouldn't recognize the login. And the reason is because they didn't realize it was like their email system, right? Like authing in the background. And so by looking at the whole, like what the UI looked like and what we were presenting them, we were able to change it to make it much more interesting. And another thing is, we let them label their existing session that they were currently logged in as, right? So they would mark their current session as this not being correct, right? So some of the things we did that were more user friendly. Go ahead. I was just going to say, one of the things we did that was more user friendly, like instead of showing a specific like town or place that you're at, we showed a whole region, right? Because then the user, we'd say Seattle, like the Seattle area instead of like a specific place, or we'd indicate, hey, this login is coming from like an email client, right? Because you could tell where it's coming from, and like just looking at what a user sees and understands, and then how they react can actually greatly help the user feel better about their account, and also help you get more security data, for example.
Yeah, there's a story of when we don't know where to geocode an IP, then it gets geocoded to the middle of the US, which happened to be a farm. And then this farm got raided by all kinds of, US official departments, because they were not to have all kinds of weapons and drugs and everything. And then after some time, all these geocoding companies decided to move the address not to the physical geographical center of the US, but to a lake a few miles up. And so then this farm is now living in peace. But you're saying, but sometimes we're trying to be helpful, we actually confuse the user and make it worse. And when you started being user-centric, you could actually not only help them, but also improve your metrics. And Tom, I want to bring it a bit to you. Like, do you also know some of these examples where users were left around or left out from from the considerations when designing security from your world? So do you have some anecdotes?
Yes. Well, I have two things that I want to quickly bring in. One is building on what Dana said there, and I know it's anecdotal evidence, the worst type of evidence, but we've discussed in previous editions of the podcast the kind of perverse incentives that exist for like platforms like Meta to kind of like incentivize the creation of new accounts and new users over potentially protecting against like the creation of fraudulent accounts or spam accounts or things like that. And I find it interesting, just on an anecdotal level, Dana, that you're sharing two recent examples of where legitimate accounts were immediately flagged as in some way being problematic, because it says to me, it reinforces to me the difficulty of the topic which we're addressing here, which is to say, it's not just a question of like having security controls in place and not having not having enough emphasis on security controls. It's also about making them rational and tuning them and not overstepping. So I think that's an important element of like the message that we're kind of crafting here, which is not just to say make sure you consider your security controls and like don't deprioritize them in your kind of PM journey, but also like tuning these things is really difficult and requires a consistent kind of evolutionary approach to how you deploy. The other thing, just on the anecdotal level, and this is very handy because this happened today. I was being shown a roadmap by a client, and it's for a couple of years of transformation where they're doing kind of like an identity governance transformation. They showed me this roadmap. They said, "Okay, Tom, this is what we're planning to do." And it was just a list of connectors. It was like a list of connectors. This is when we'll do this connector. This is when we'll do mainframe. This is when we'll do, Entra, And I said, okay, but like, guys, where is your functional outcome here? Like, how can you actually tell, like, end users and auditors and governance people like don't care about connectors? Where are you showing me that this actually starts to make a difference to the user, and where are you showing me in this view the steps that you're taking in order to train people, for example, for the fact that like, they'll have to understand what the concept of an SOD is, a segregation of duties, and things that they were able to do previously, they will not be able to do now. And that's a consequence of technical capabilities that are put in place. But it's not, it's not something that was planned for.
By putting in place new stuff, they were actually making it worse because they were losing some of the crucial things they had before.
More so that they just weren't planning to take any kind of user adoption element into account. They said, the view was we have a technical problem, which is to say we have a bunch of systems that aren't integrated with our identity governance tooling. So like we can't say who has access to what. Do they have the right level of access? Do they even warrant this access at all? And they said, okay, well, the thing is, we're going to put in place connectors so that our identity governance tooling can talk to this directory service or to this DB or to this flat file-based system, and that solves our problem. But that doesn't solve the problem because then the users have no idea what to do. Dario.
Dario, go ahead.
And I think it's a question of incentives. Like, it's easy for teams to build features and throw them out and like throw them at users or at employees and say, here's what we have built, and if you don't use it, you're not as secure as you could be, and if something happens, it's on to you. And I think that really connects to what Christina said in the beginning. Don't require users to make decisions that are not necessary for them to do. Like, if there is a capability that makes them more secure, that should be a default. Should be offered by default. So I think, understand the user, understand what they want to do, and decide what is the right default for them, rather than to give them a bouquet of options and then say, if you don't choose the right options, it's your fault if something happens.
But then you also have to make it unique to the user, right? Like, Christina, I want to ask you this next question. Like, if we are making, imagine we are trying to secure employees of a big company, and you'll be like, no, you cannot use this tool. And then there's always going to be a few employees that have very good reason to use a tool. And then all of a sudden you have to make a trade-off. Do I let it go or do I not let it go? And how do you make these trade-offs, and maybe not specifically around tools, but how do you make this personal? Because I can imagine that, especially when organizations grow larger, that this is becoming unmanageable. You can't, if you're like Marks and Spencer, which we discussed last week, that has tens of thousands of employees, you can't approve or review every single thing that all of those employees want. So you have to make policies that do trade-offs. So how do you do that? Any thoughts? Or any other thought you want to add?
I mean, there's a lot of things, and I'm still learning, and I'll continue, hopefully, always learning. But I think some of the things that I've noticed are no different than building any other kind of software, not just security software. Like understanding the critical user journeys, making decisions, and building the software in such a way that is explainable and self-evident as much as possible. There will always be a long tail of use cases that don't make sense or we haven't accounted for. if we did a good job understanding the critical user journey and what the tool is trying to achieve, then those will be a single digit, and then we can tackle them. I think one that software or more usable software is one. The other one is software doesn't exist in isolation. So the processes, incentives, and policies in the organization matter. And as an engineer myself, I always get a little bit an allergic reaction when I hear process or policy. But I think recently I realized the value of it. So that's one aspect, and we can dig into it if you like. But kind of to your point, even if it's not about explaining a security decision to an end user, but just explaining any change to my own team, explaining the why is so powerful. Same as asking why are we making decision, what problem we're trying to solve. One of the biggest compliments my team has given me is that you actually explained why you made the decision, even if we don't agree with you, which happens. I do go out of my way to explain why I make the decision. And I think if software or product managers designing softwares for users this would be reflected in the software, it will be easier for the end users.
Yeah, so basically explaining it, and I want to bring this up to a question to all four of you. Let's say we're designing a new feature. And I want us to think about what are things that we can do to do a user-centric security from the beginning. And I'll give you an anecdote, is that I was sitting next to someone a few months ago, or half a year ago, or a year ago, I don't remember, when passkeys just got launched. And their phone buzzed, and they were requested to verify their identity with a passkey. And they said to me, hey, I don't have a passkey. What's a passkey? And before I could answer, it's like, oh, it's my fingerprint. Just tell me you need my fingerprint. Why do you ask me for a passkey? I didn't know I had a passkey. Just ask me for my fingerprint. Then I know what to give you, right? And so passkeys is incredibly complex. It's a super complex subject to explain to a user that is not tech savvy. And also because they're so intertwined with things we already know, like Windows Hello or Face Unlock or all those kind of things. And so I'm incredibly, impressed by the teams at big companies that have been able to launch these things and bring it to billions of people, and I'm super happy with it. But it also shows that doing really user-centric security well is just really hard. So let's say someone's listening here and they're building a product, I don't know, some kind of photo exchange app or something like this, and they want to make it secure in a way that is user-centric. What are some of the things that they could be doing? Anyone? I see Dana has something. I can see it.
I think they need the bottom, like just foundational is you need to know who your user is. If you don't know who your user is and who's going to be, you can't just know a segment. You have to know the whole user base, because when you launch your feature, it's going to impact all of them. Like, it's great. I can design passkey for myself and Dario and Tom and Christina and your own, and we're all security experts, and like we can read a dialogue that says, hey, you need to verify your passkey, and we'll know we need a thumbprint. But if it's my wife or my kids or my neighbor, like, they're gonna have no idea about it. Now, it could be okay. Like the way you build things and with resources there, sometimes you put out a minimum value prop, like just to get it out, and you have to cut corners, but you need to know where you're eventually going and the steps that are going to get there if you're going to try to put up these bare bones UIs or placeholders or just enough things or make just enough to release. But I think it all goes down to understanding your users and how they're going to interact with the feature or the product that you're using. And if you don't have that fundamental of knowing who your users are, then you're going to get it wrong, right? And so
know your users and how they will interact. And you also said something else which was interesting, is know your roadmap. Basically, what are you releasing now? What are you releasing next? What else? How can we make sure that we build security in a user-centric way, Dario?
I mean, talk to real people. Like, in the end, like, I think one thing that, like, and we're not real people, because like for us, going from passwords to passkey is a a technological change. It's like, oh, this is cool because you can't get phished, you can't get sprayed, you can't get whatever anymore. But for users, for real people, this is a fundamental mental model change. Like it's not just the UI looks different, but it's the way they think about their account is going to change. And I still like to remember the times on Google Campus in Mountain View whenever we had some UX designs or something we wanted to know, we just headed over to the Google shop where the Android statues were, or I don't know, and where tourists came to buy Google merchandise, and we'll give people vouchers or stickers or pins or t-shirts in exchange for 10, 15, 20 minutes of their time to look at things. And this was at that point, many teams did that. Many consumer teams did that, like Google Photos and other teams, because, well, they understood their users are their users. But I think we were the first inverted or security team that started to do that, because we felt we need to understand if what we're showing the user to tell them that we protect them, or what we ask the user to do at each given point, that they understand the value of it. And if you don't understand the value, then they're not going to do it. And then we could just point at them and say you should, but that's not an approach that's successful. So talk to real people, talk to people, and show them what you want to do, and don't just do it in your own little lab.
Tom?
I was thinking about that, Dario, when you were speaking, and also going back to a term that was used by someone. I think it might have been you, Jörn, in the intro, about user fatigue. So, I mean, the kind of interview method that you mentioned, Dario, obviously is a short, sharp, kind of very context-rich way of getting feedback from people. But in your guys' opinion, is there also a kind of a systemic way to measure user fatigue that you can look at it from a PM perspective that gives you an idea of like when people are dropping out of the funnel? Is there a certain kind of like breaking point at which people like get frustrated with the CAPTCHA, or have another element whereby you're actually kind of able in a systemic way to look at where user fatigue is manifesting in an authentication flow or in a business flow, and think about how to address it?
Well, one of the things that we could see is that, there's some login challenge that we call the Google prompt, where when you log in, you type username and password, and then you get a prompt on your phone there. You could click yes, right? And we would see account takeovers where the person, the hacker, would be in one country and the person clicking yes would be on the other side of the world. And especially if they would get spammed by a bunch of these requests, at some point they just think, oh, it must be Outlook trying to connect to my Gmail or something else, and they just click yes. So
or they just want to go to bed.
Oh, they want to go to bed. Yeah, and it's like that's one way that we could spot fatigue. I don't know, Dana or Christina, if you have other ideas around this as well.
I think you I mean, you need to know your attacker and your user journey, and you need to monitor that. I mean, we talked about the decay. I mentioned the problems that I saw with Meta. Like, are they having decay of their algorithms? And they should be monitoring that, and the user journey, and looking at the funnel and the fallout, and like how many valid users are just walking away because they're immediately suspended. Like, all that stuff is the PM and the product team's responsibility to understand how these security systems are being used, how they change over time, how their algorithms are doing. Like this is just fundamental stuff that unfortunately doesn't always happen, because you launch products and then teams are reorged and assets, funding goes away and things happen. But like, you need to have these KPIs and like measurements when you're defining these systems, so you can track these sort of things and these user interactions and what's happening, and is the user getting over prompted. Like, that's part of your job, right? Like, when you're building these systems, is to anticipate this type of stuff.
So the right KPIs, and Christina, I wanted to bring you also back in, because in the beginning you said something interesting. You said it's also trying to know when you have to get away or out of the way of the user, and remove decisions from the user. I was wondering if you would talk a bit more about that, because I think it's a really interesting part of user-centric security design of like, hey, what decisions can we take away from the user so they don't have to make them?
Yeah, I mean, most of my experience was focused on B2B. So we are either securing products for users or building security products for users and companies. So in that case, what kind of plus on to Dana's comments on like this is just table stake stuff. Like if you're a company, it doesn't matter, small, big corporation, you acquire a software, and one, you expect to have some monitoring in place, ideally customer-centric monitoring, so the customer doesn't just get some, useless graphs, but actually something that's meaningful to how they use the product. And security, there's no exception here. So maybe what I'm thinking of is I don't necessarily think that users interacting a lot with the product, while it can be a valuable metric if you're not talking about security, right? The less interaction with the product is maybe better. In coming back to the topic of your podcast, right? Inverted PM. I think in a way, less interaction with a product when it comes to security is probably preferable. And
All right.
I mean, just supporting my parents through anything tech. I'm in my spare time tech support for my 60-year-old parents who don't speak English. It's a factor of that. Like if you measure how much they spend on something, then it's clear that the thing is not intuitive and they shouldn't be doing that, going through that flow.
Yeah. Dana, Dario, get in there.
Dana was first.
Like we've talked about this before, but like getting the human decision making out of these security processes is like your ultimate goal, right? Humans make mistakes. You want all these decisions to potentially be binary. So wherever you can use data and allow the system or the AI to make those decisions, as long as you have traceability and you understand how the decisions are being made, you're better off, because humans can get tricked, humans can make the wrong decision, humans can get just misled or misunderstood. And so when you and then when you're asking a human to do that, you're actually like bothering them potentially during these things. So anytime you can get a human interaction out of a flow or a security process, or I think about recovery, right? Like recovery should be automated, right? Like you don't want anybody making a decision because they can get manipulated. And so I think that's something that everybody should keep in mind, is like, you, even if at this point you need a human interaction, you should be building towards getting rid of the human interactions in the future when you have enough data, or your systems are more mature, or you have new technology to bring. So it's like, when you interact with humans, you should have the best possible experience as they integrate with your security product, but you should also try to get them out of those interactions out of it, because it bothers them, and it causes friction, and they don't always make the best choice. So it behooves all of us to limit those interactions or make them as small as possible.
Yeah, and there I'm going to come to you in a moment, because this hints at the next part that we also want to discuss, is about success, right? So I was talking to a team that has a security product, and I was telling them ultimate success is if no one uses the product, right? There's nothing for them to come. Never, they don't need to touch the settings because they're automatically set the right way. They don't need to respond to incidents because they're blocked automatically. Maybe the only time they come is because they need to make some report for a regulator or something. So success in this, imagine explaining to VP, hey, the metric for our success is that as few people as possible come to this tool, right? But we should still build it. And so, user-centric security can sometimes lead to weird things, like getting the human out instead of in, maybe less interaction, people not visiting. So Dario, what do you think if someone is building their first product, how do they know that they did a good user-centric design during it?
Well, I had another topic, but I think they know, because if they know how much they solved the problem that they were set out to solve, like it could be a security, it could be a privacy, it could be a reliability problem, but like in the end, you're building features or functionality to solve a specific problem, and you rather tie it back to that than to a vanity metric like click-through rate or enrollment rate or anything that involves the user, because like, as Dana said, the user wants to make, like, the user is often being bothered by something. Like, we're distracting the user from doing what they want to do by having them to do security. And if you take that out of the occasion, you really build things that where people understand that this is what they need to do, like be opinionated, and then they have to activate something if they need to activate it, and wherever possible, build functionality that doesn't require the person to interact with the product in itself. And just people clicking on it or people not clicking on it is not a success rate. I think the success rate has to be tied back to, are you solving the actual problem? One of the things I wanted to add for what Dana said before is, where I fully agree with him, it's also, if you reduce the interactions that users have to make with your products to make your product more secure to an absolute minimum, that then allows you also to be opinionated. Like one of the things that I've seen over and over again in research is when we ask people, would you enable two-factor authentication? Would you enable a recovery method? Would you do this? Would you do that? They often say, well, if it's so important, why do you even give me the choice? Like if having a recovery method is so important for the security of my insert whatever account you want to, then don't give me an option. Or if two-factor authentication protects my Etsy shop so much more than not having two-factor authentication, then don't give me the choice of not having it. But you can't do that if you prompt them to do something new every second day. You can only be opinionated on few things rather than to have them to jump through those hoops all the time.
Yeah, luckily we're starting to see that more. Microsoft is now requiring 2Z for admins. Google is starting to require it. GitHub was one of the first I experienced. So we are becoming more opinionated. So Dana, let's quickly go to you before I want to punt it closing out to Tom.
Sure. Actually, something that I was thinking about is actually Tom probably has a good opinion on this, which is like I've been thinking more about, hey, these security features I launch and everything, but like this whole user-centric design goes into on the enterprise, like what knobs do you give the admins to make in your security policies? And we had big debates when we were launching like a product like identity protection, and it was controversial, but we were like, hey, we want the system to make all the security policy decisions. And the reason is because like for example, you could have admins that make decisions at a point of time about things that they're going to do, and then those people leave and no one knows why the decision was actually made. Like, why did we let someone from this zip code, like anybody can get into the system and bypass like MFA? Like they made that decision like 10 years ago, but why? Right. And so it's like you want to get those knobs and configurations out and actually let the machine make all those decisions if possible to make those security policy decisions. And then I went and I was talking to a bunch of other products, and they were like, oh, and we're stuck in the reverse. We gave everybody, all the admins, too many knobs, and now we're stuck with all these legacy like settings that we allowed them to do because they, at one point, these people were experts and they thought they knew what they were doing, and they might have made a bad decision, or it was the right decision, but now it's not. And so getting the humans as much as possible out of these policy decisions is like an important thing, then an important trend.
Great.
Tom,
Yeah, Tom, I want to also ask you, because we talked a lot about these big decisions, But at some point we have to go to leadership. We have to go to say, it's going to take us 3 months more because we want to make it secure when we launch. Or you might have to go, and this, Christina, I also want to ask you the same. So let's go to Tom and then to Christina. Like, how do you talk to leadership and explain why it is necessary what you do, and bring them along in this user-centric journey?
I mean, I have a very short answer to this, which is I would go in, I would take in kind of a logon page for, let's say, for the product that's being built. I would overlay through my exceptional graphic design capabilities. I would overlay a social login over the product, and then I would say, this is something that, according to our market data, aids retention by X, aids kind of uptake by Y, and aids our security posture by Z. And it's something that's super tangible because everyone knows now what a social login is. Most people, even if they're not tech savvy, see a trusted logo, click on it, feel kind of, let's say, protected by the kind of enterprise grade experience that's associated with it. And we know that, you know, it represents a mixed blessing from a security professional perspective, because again, it's single point of failure, and it's something that's also heavily targeted from an attacker's perspective. But in most people's cases, you're going to have like some form of user behavioral analytics in the back end. You're able to kind of outsource that through the IDP as someone who's a product manager, or someone who's developing something new. And you say, if you give me time and budget to introduce social login into this is the impact that it's going to have on our product, and these are other kind of, let's say, well-known use cases, well-known products which are levering the same approach. So something very tangible, something very very achievable for even leadership to kind of understand, and something that's very simple.
And metrics, I heard you brought in metrics immediately. So metrics, tangible, story, understandable. Christina, when security teams have talks with leadership, what are normally some successful things to bring into that conversation about why security needs to be done?
I mean, it all goes back to customer centricity. The leadership team, or the product leadership in that sense, I see them as a customer. And I always give this goofy example of the cupcake factory, where the job of the cupcake factory owner is to make amazing cupcakes for kids and for their customers. So whatever I do as security, I need to support the business in their business goals. So as long as we don't, I try very much, though in my company, I mostly talk to very technical executives. I try to not dazzle them with security jargon, and instead I try to go out of my way to understand what their goals are and to position what we're doing in a way that supports their mission. And if I can't find a way that what I'm doing supports the product goal and the mission, then maybe I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So I'm definitely trying to exercise this empathy for our customer, in this case, the product owner, and understand what they care about. And then I'm like, at which point in time, creating a product for enterprise, where in that offering does security fit? And more often than none, surprisingly, even in these days with AI and proliferation of a bunch of attacks from ransomware, phishing, and so on, security is more and more seen as a key differentiator, especially when you're in the B2B. Then actually matching the security measures to the risk tolerance and security posture of the product. So if I'm securing a cupcake factory, I'll probably come in with different measures than securing like a certification authority, right? So matching the security to the business risk tolerance. And I think understanding the security risk is business risk, and having that conversation with the product leads has usually been very productive. And it can be both like, what would happen if these customers were breached, and then we'd have to publish a full audit of the decisions we've made leading up to this product launch.
That's great. We are coming to the end of this week's episode. I think, as always, I've learned a lot. We've talked about when user-centric security design goes wrong, and then we talked about some of the approaches of how to do it right, which is about knowing your users, talking to them, finding out how they tick so you can make a better product, monitoring your user flows constantly so they don't go out of whack. And we've heard some great examples of how we were able to change it. Know the attacker journeys as well, having the right KPIs to monitor. And also we talked a lot about how to take the human out the loop as much as possible for different reasons. And I love the ending where I think I'm going to walk away. It's like user-centric security is when we can make the same amount of cupcakes, where we make sure that we tie the success of security to the success of the business outcome. If our security lowers the output of the business, then we should really wonder, like, did we do too much? And so that's kind of, I think, a really big, nice litmus test that you can do, sort of a golden standard, like, is my security going to reduce the output of the business? If so, then we should wonder if we really need it. And with that, I think we're coming to this week's ending. Thank you so much, Christina, for joining us for the first time. Really enjoyed having you. Thank you as always, Dana. Enjoy your travels. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Dario. And remember, if you want to engage with us, you can find our group on LinkedIn. You can find all of us, including Christina, on LinkedIn. Feel free to message us, connect with us. And we see you all in the next time.